The bullet that killed Amelia Sinclair's husband came through their bedroom window on a Tuesday night in September 1883, and she learned three things in the space of a heartbeat. That the man she had loved was not who she thought he was, that the marshal who arrived at dawn wore a badge paid for by her husband's blood money, and that every promise ever whispered to her in the dark had been built on lies. The marshal, a thick-necked man named Warren who smelled of whiskey and tobacco, told her she was lucky to be alive, that Thomas Sinclair had made enemies from Tucson to Santa Fe, that half the territory would sleep easier knowing he was gone. He did not offer condolences. He did not remove his hat. He looked at her with eyes that suggested he knew exactly what kind of man Thomas had been, and that he wondered what kind of woman would marry such a man, as if she had chosen this, as if she had known. When he left, he took the ledger, and she never saw it again. The funeral was sparsely attended. A few townspeople came out of obligation rather than respect. The banker who held the mortgage on their small ranch at the edge of town stood at the back, his expression carefully neutral. Thomas's business partner, a wiry man named Garrett who owned the freight company, gave a short eulogy that revealed nothing of substance. Amelia stood beside the grave in her black dress, her face veiled, her hands clasped so tightly her knuckles ached and she felt nothing. No tears came. No sorrow rose in her throat. She buried a stranger that day, a man who had worn her husband's face but whose heart had belonged to schemes and lies and women she would never meet. In the weeks that followed, she learned the full scope of Thomas's deception. The ranch, which she had believed was paid for, carried a debt that would take years to settle. The money in their household account was barely enough to last the winter. The freight business partnership that Thomas had claimed would secure their future was tangled in legal disputes and unpaid invoices. Creditors appeared at her door with demands and thinly veiled threats. Men she had never seen before rode up to the house at odd hours, asking where Thomas had hidden things, what he had told her, whether she knew about certain arrangements. She learned to keep her rifle loaded and her doors locked. She learned to sleep lightly. She learned that the world had little patience for a widow with debts, and no protector. By the time the cottonwoods along the Gila River turned gold and the desert air took on the sharp bite of autumn, Amelia had sold everything that was not essential. The good furniture went first, then Thomas's clothes and personal effects, then the horses except for one aging mare that she needed for transportation. She kept the ranch only because selling it would not have covered the mortgage, and the bank seemed willing to let her try to make the payments, perhaps out of pity, perhaps because they knew the land was not worth much to anyone else. It sat at the end of a rutted track 5 miles from Coolidge, a small adobe house with a barn and a few outbuildings, surrounded by scrub and dust, and the kind of silence that made you hear your own heartbeat. She might have managed, might have found a way to scrape by if the well had not run dry in November. She stood looking at the empty hole in the ground and felt something break inside her that was not quite hope but close to it. Without water, the ranch was worthless. Without water, she could not survive. She went into town and inquired about well diggers, but the cost was more than she could afford, and the men she spoke to looked at her with expressions that ranged from skepticism to something darker, as if a woman alone was an invitation rather than a person with a problem to solve. That evening, sitting in her kitchen with a single lamp burning and a cup of cold coffee growing colder, she considered her options. She could leave, go back east to the cousins who had disapproved of her marriage to Thomas, and who would welcome her return with "I told you so" expressions and conditional charity. She could stay and try to find work in town, though respectable employment for women in Coolidge was limited to sewing, laundry, teaching if a position opened, or the kinds of work that were not spoken of in polite company. She could marry again, and there were men who had already made their interest known, men with land or businesses or simply the desire for a woman in their beds, men who looked at her with calculations in their eyes that had nothing to do with love and everything to do with acquisition. She chose none of these. Instead, she decided to fix the well herself, to find a way to dig deeper or shore up the walls or whatever needed to be done, because the alternative was surrender, and she had already lost too much to give up the one thing that was actually hers. It was a foolish decision, born of desperation and stubbornness in equal measure, but it was her decision, and that mattered. The next morning, she rode into Coolidge with a list of supplies and the last of her household money. The town was small, a collection of adobe and wooden buildings clustered along the road that ran north to Phoenix and south to Tucson. There was a general store, a saloon, a church that doubled as a schoolhouse, the bank, a livery stable, a boarding house, and a scattering of homes. Beyond the town, the land stretched flat and brown to the distant mountains, broken only by the green line of cottonwoods that marked the river. It was not a pretty place, but it was practical, a town that existed because the railroad had put a water stop here, and because the surrounding ranches needed somewhere to buy supplies and sell cattle. She tied her mare outside the general store and went in, her list in hand. The store was dim and smelled of coffee and leather and the sweet dust scent of grain. The proprietor, a man named Hobbs, nodded to her from behind the counter. She gathered rope, a pickaxe, a shovel, and several wooden beams that she hoped would work to reinforce the well walls. When she brought them to the counter, Hobbs looked at the items and then at her. "You planning to dig?" he asked. "My well needs work," she said. "That is hard labor for a woman alone." "I am aware." He tallied the cost and she paid, counting out coins that left her purse distressingly light. He wrapped the tools in burlap and helped her carry them to her wagon, which she had borrowed from a neighbor in exchange for a promise to return it by evening. As she was securing the load, a voice behind her said, "That is a lot of equipment for well work." She turned to find a man leaning against the storefront, one boot propped against the wall, his hat tipped back enough to show dark hair and a face that was sun-browned and sharp-featured. He was tall and lean, dressed in worn denim and a faded shirt, with a gun belt slung low on his hips. His eyes were gray, the color of smoke or storm clouds, and they watched her with a directness that was not quite rude but close to it. "It is my business," she said, and returned to the wagon. "That pickaxe is not balanced right for well digging," he said, not moving. "The handle is too short. You will tear up your hands before you get 3 feet down." She glanced at the pickaxe, then at him. "You make a habit of critiquing the purchases of strangers, only when they are about to waste money and effort on something that will not work." He pushed off the wall and walked over, moving with the easy gait of someone comfortable in his own skin. Up close, she could see he was younger than she had first thought, maybe 30, with lines at the corners of his eyes that came from squinting into the sun. "Cole Matthews," he said, and touched the brim of his hat. "I work cattle for the Barham Ranch up north, but I have dug my share of wells." "Amelia Sinclair," she said, because manners were instinctive even when you did not particularly want to be polite. "And I appreciate the advice, but I have already made my purchase." "Fair enough," he said. "But if you are working out on the Sinclair place, you should know that the ground out there is mostly caliche once you get past the first few feet. You need a digging bar and a lot of patience, not just a pickaxe." She looked at him more carefully. "How do you know where I live?" "Small town," he said. "People talk. I heard about your husband passing. I am sorry for your loss." There was no pity in his voice, which she appreciated. She nodded once. "Thank you. If you need help with the well, I am staying in town for a few days," he said. "I could ride out and take a look, maybe give you some advice that would save you time." "I cannot afford to hire help," she said bluntly. "I did not ask for money," he said. "Just offering." She studied him, trying to determine his angle. Men did not offer help for free, not in her experience. There was always something they wanted, some expectation lurking beneath the surface. But his expression was open, his posture relaxed, and there was nothing in his eyes that set off the alarms that had become her constant companion since Thomas died. "Why would you do that?" she asked. He shrugged. "I have time, and it does not sit right with me. The thought of someone struggling with a well when I know how to fix them. Call it cowboy courtesy." "Cowboy courtesy," she repeated, skeptical. "It is a thing," he said, and there was the faintest hint of amusement in his voice. "We are not all gunfighters and drifters. Some of us were raised to help neighbors. I am not your neighbor. You live in the territory and you need help, close enough." She wanted to refuse. Every instinct told her to refuse, to take her supplies and go home and handle this herself, because depending on anyone else was a risk she could not afford. But she also knew that he was probably right about the pickaxe and the caliche and her own ignorance about well digging, and that pride was expensive when you were down to your last dollars. "One visit," she said finally. "You can look at the well and tell me what I need to do." "But I am not agreeing to anything beyond that." "Fair," he said. "When is good for you?" "This afternoon, if you are available." "I am returning the wagon by evening," he nodded. "I will ride out around too. The Sinclair place 5 miles south on the old freight road." "That is correct." "I will see you then, Mrs. Sinclair," he said, and tipped his hat before walking off toward the livery stable, leaving her standing beside her loaded wagon, wondering if she had just made a reasonable decision or a mistake. She drove back to the ranch, unloaded the supplies, and spent the rest of the morning trying not to second-guess herself. She cleaned the house, which did not need cleaning, and made a pot of coffee, which she did not particularly want, and changed from her work dress into something slightly less worn, then changed back because she did not want him to think she was trying to impress him. By the time she heard hoofbeats on the road, she was annoyed with herself for caring at all. Cole Matthews rode up on a sorrel gelding that looked well cared for and trail smart. He dismounted, tied the horse to the fence rail, and walked over to where she stood by the well. He did not waste time on pleasantries, just crouched beside the well opening and peered down into the darkness, then picked up a stone and dropped it. She heard it hit bottom with a dull thud. "How deep is it?" he asked. 20 feet, I think. My husband had it dug when we first moved here. And it just went dry last week. There was water, and then there was not." He stood and looked around, his eyes scanning the landscape with the practiced gaze of someone who knew how to read land. "The river is about 3 miles that way," he said, pointing west. "Your water table probably shifted. It happens in dry years. You might be able to dig deeper and hit it again, or you might need to relocate the well entirely." "How do I know which?" "I can go down and take a look at the walls, see if there is any seepage that would indicate water nearby." "Do you have rope and a lamp?" She fetched both from the barn, and he rigged a harness with the efficiency of someone who had done this before. He stripped off his gun belt and his vest, lit the lamp, and lowered himself into the well hand over hand, the rope tied around his chest. She knelt at the edge and watched the lamplight recede into darkness, her heart beating uncomfortably fast. It occurred to her that she was trusting a stranger with her only well and her only rope, that if he wanted to rob her or hurt her, she had just made it very easy, but he did not. He called up observations in a steady voice, noting the dryness of the walls, the stability of the stones, the lack of any moisture below. After about 10 minutes, he called for her to pull him up. She hauled on the rope and he climbed, emerging dusty and squinting into the sunlight. "The well is sound," he said, coiling the rope. "But you are not going to find water by going deeper, not here. The rock is bone dry all the way down. You would be better off digging a new well closer to the river where the water table is more reliable." Her heart sank. "I cannot afford to dig a new well." "I know," he said quietly. "That is why I am offering to do it for you." She stared at him. "What?" "I will dig you a new well," he said. "It will take a few weeks, working in the evenings and on days I am not riding for the bar, but I can do it. You will have water by Christmas. I told you I cannot pay you. I am not asking for payment." "Then what are you asking for?" He looked at her, and there was something in his expression that was both serious and kind. "Nothing," he said. "I am asking for nothing. I am offering because it is the right thing to do." She took a step back, her hands clenched at her sides. "I do not need charity. It is not charity, it is help. There is a difference." "Is there?" Her voice was sharper than she intended, edged with all the fear and anger that had been building in her for months. "Because in my experience, men do not offer help without expecting something in return. So, what is it you want, Mr. Matthews? Do you think that if you dig me a well, I will be grateful enough to invite you into my bed? Do you think you can buy your way into my good graces with labor instead of money? Or are you just looking for a widow who is desperate enough to overlook whatever flaws you come with?" He did not flinch, did not get angry. He just watched her with those steady gray eyes and said, "I think you have been hurt badly, and I am sorry for that. But I am not the man who hurt you, Mrs. Sinclair, and I am not looking to take advantage of you. I am offering to dig a well because you need one and I know how. That is all. People do not do things for free," she said, but her voice had lost some of its sharpness. "Some people do not," he agreed, "but some people do. My father taught me that a man's character is measured by what he does when no one is watching and when there is nothing in it for him. I am offering because it matters to me that I am the kind of man who helps when he can. You can accept or refuse, but either way my offer stands." She wanted to argue, to find the flaw in his logic, the hidden motive beneath his words. But he simply stood there, patient and calm, and she could not find it. Perhaps it was hidden deeper than she could see, or perhaps, and this was the truly frightening thought, he meant exactly what he said. "One condition," she said finally. "You let me feed you. If you are going to work here, the least I can do is provide meals." Something that might have been relief crossed his face. "That is fair. And you tell me the truth," she said. "If you decide this is too much work, or if you want something in return, you tell me directly. I have had enough of lies and hidden agendas to last a lifetime." "I promise," he said, and the way he said it, simple and direct, made her believe him, at least enough to take the risk. "All right," she said. "You can dig the well." He smiled, and it changed his face entirely, softening the hard lines and making him look younger. "I will start tomorrow evening. I need to talk to my foreman, make sure I can get the time off, but it should not be a problem. The ranch is between drives right now, and we are mostly doing maintenance work." "Thank you," she said, and the words felt strange in her mouth, rusty from disuse. "You are welcome, Mrs. Sinclair," he said. He collected his vest and gun belt, untied his horse, and swung into the saddle with the easy grace of someone who had spent most of his life on horseback. "I will see you tomorrow." She watched him ride away, dust rising behind his horse, and wondered what she had just agreed to. He came the next evening, just as the sun was beginning to sink toward the western mountains, turning the sky the color of embers. He brought tools of his own, a digging bar and a specialized pickaxe and a wheelbarrow, which he unloaded from a small wagon hitched behind his horse. He walked the property with her, looking for the best place to site the new well, eventually settling on a spot about 100 yards west of the house, closer to the river, and where the ground showed more promise of holding water. "It is going to be hard work," he warned her. "The ground here is tough." "I did not think it would be easy," she said. He nodded and set to work. She watched for a while, observing the way he approached the task with methodical precision, marking out the circle for the well, clearing the surface rocks, beginning the slow process of breaking ground. When he paused to rest, she brought him water, and when the sun set, she called him in for supper. She had made stew, simple but filling, with bread that she had baked that morning. They ate at the small table in her kitchen, the silence between them not quite comfortable but not hostile either. He ate with the appetite of a man who worked hard, and he complimented the food in a way that seemed genuine rather than polite. "How long have you worked for the bar?" she asked, more to fill the silence than because she particularly cared. 3 years, he said. "Before that, I was down in Texas, working ranches around Fort Worth. Before that, I grew up on a farm in Missouri." "That is a lot of moving." "I like seeing new places," he said, "and ranch work travels well. There is always need for someone who knows cattle and can sit a horse." "Do you plan to stay in Arizona?" He considered the question. "Maybe. The territory is growing and there is opportunity here if you are willing to work for it. I have been thinking about buying some land, starting my own herd eventually, but that is years away. Right now, I am just trying to save money and learn as much as I can." She appreciated that he had goals, that he was not just drifting. It spoke to a kind of stability that she found reassuring. They talked a while longer, carefully polite conversation that revealed little of substance. And then he thanked her for the meal and rode back to town. She cleaned up the dishes and tried not to think about how pleasant it had been to have someone to talk to share a meal with, because that way lay vulnerability, and she could not afford that. He came every evening for the next 2 weeks, arriving just before sunset and working until dark, then staying for supper before riding back. Progress on the well was slow but steady. The hole grew deeper, the pile of excavated earth larger. He worked with a patience that seemed inexhaustible, never complaining, never rushing. She began to anticipate his arrival, to listen for the sound of his horse on the road, and she told herself it was only because she was curious about the well's progress, not because she enjoyed his company. But she did enjoy his company, more than she wanted to admit. He was easy to be around, comfortable in silence but willing to talk when the mood struck. He told her stories about his work on the bar, about the cattle drives and the other ranch hands, about the land and the weather and the small dramas that made up daily life. He asked her about her own life, but carefully, respecting the boundaries she set, never pushing when she deflected questions about Thomas or her marriage. One evening, about 3 weeks into the project, she brought supper out to where he was working, figuring he would appreciate the extra time. She had made fried chicken and biscuits, and they sat on the ground beside the growing well, eating off tin plates while the sky turned purple and the first stars appeared. "You are a good cook," he said, and she could tell he meant it. "My mother insisted I learn," she said. She believed that a woman's value was measured in domestic skills. "You believe that," she considered. "I think a person's value is measured in their character, not their skills, but I am glad I know how to cook. It is useful." Fair point. He finished his chicken and set the plate aside. "Can I ask you something?" She tensed instinctively. "You can ask. Why did you decide to trust me? That first day you could have sent me away, but you did not. Why?" It was a question she had asked herself many times over the past few weeks. "I suppose because you gave me a choice," she said slowly. You offered help, but you did not insist. You respected my boundaries. That mattered." "I am glad," he said. "I know you have reasons to be careful, and I want you to know that I meant what I said. I am not expecting anything from you beyond the meals, which, to be honest, are excellent and more than fair trade for the work." She smiled despite herself. "You are very persistent in your virtue, Mr. Matthews." "Cole," he said, "and I am not virtuous. I am just trying to be decent." "Most people do not bother with that." "Then most people are missing out," he said. "Decency costs nothing and returns dividends." She looked at him in the gathering darkness, at the honest lines of his face, and felt something shift inside her, a small crack in the walls she had built. It was terrifying and exhilarating in equal measure, and she did not know what to do with it. "The well is coming along nicely," she said, changing the subject. If he noticed her deflection, he did not comment. "We should hit good water in another week or two. The ground is getting damper, which is a good sign." "What happens when you finish?" The question hung in the air between them, weighted with implications neither of them addressed directly. "I suppose I go back to full-time work at the bar," he said, "but I will still be around. The ranch is not that far, and I come into Coolidge regularly for supplies." "Of course," she said, and told herself the disappointment she felt was ridiculous. They finished eating, and he returned to work for another hour while she cleaned up. When he finally climbed out of the well, his shirt soaked with sweat and his hands raw despite the gloves he wore, she had coffee waiting. He drank it gratefully, sitting on the porch steps of her house, and she sat beside him, careful to maintain a respectable distance. "Do you ever regret coming west?" he asked suddenly. It was such an unexpected question that she answered honestly. "Every day," she said, "but I do not know if going back would be any better. I am stuck between a past I cannot return to and a future I cannot see." "That sounds lonely." "It is," she admitted, and the honesty of it startled her. He was quiet for a moment, then said, "For what it is worth, I think you are brave. Not many people could handle what you have been through and still be standing." "I do not feel brave. I feel like I am barely holding on." "Sometimes those are the same thing," he said. They sat in silence, drinking coffee and watching the night deepen around them. When he left, riding away into the darkness, she stood on the porch and watched until she could no longer see him, and she thought about bravery and trust and the small promises that build into something larger. The well was finished in early December, just as Cole had predicted. He climbed out of the hole for the last time, covered in mud and grinning, and said, "We have water, Mrs. Sinclair. Good, clean water." She peered down into the well and saw the dark gleam of it, reflecting lamplight. Relief washed over her so powerfully that her knees went weak. "Thank you," she said, and her voice broke on the words. "Thank you so much." "You are welcome," he said, and there was quiet pride in his voice, the satisfaction of a job well done. They spent the rest of the evening building a proper frame and pulley system for the well, installing the bucket and rope, testing the mechanism to make sure it worked smoothly. By the time they finished, it was full dark, and she insisted he stay for a proper celebratory supper. She had roasted a chicken and made potatoes and greens, and she opened a bottle of wine that she had been saving for no particular occasion. They ate by lamplight, the food and wine warming her from the inside, and the conversation flowed more easily than it ever had before. He told her about his childhood in Missouri, about his parents who had died of fever when he was 16. About the years he had spent drifting and working and trying to figure out who he wanted to be. She found herself telling him about her own childhood in Ohio, about her father who had been a store clerk and her mother who had taken in sewing, about the dreams she had once had of adventure and romance that had led her to say yes when Thomas Sinclair had asked her to marry him and move west. "Do you regret marrying him?" Cole asked, and there was no judgment in the question, only curiosity. "I regret not seeing who he really was," she said. "I regret believing the lies, but I do not regret coming west. This place, as hard as it is, feels more honest than anywhere I have ever lived. The land does not pretend to be anything other than what it is." "That is a good way to put it," he said. "The desert is honest. It will kill you if you are not careful, but it does not lie about it." She poured them both more wine, feeling reckless and celebratory. "What about you? Do you ever regret the choices you have made?" "Only the bad ones," he said with a slight smile, "but I try not to make too many of those." "And how do you decide which choices are good?" "I ask myself if I will be proud of it tomorrow," he said. "If the answer is yes, I do it. If the answer is no, I walk away." "That sounds simple." "It is simple. It is not always easy, but it is simple." She looked at him across the table, at the lamplight catching in his eyes, and felt the pull of attraction that she had been trying to ignore for weeks. It was not just that he was handsome, though he was. It was the steadiness of him, the reliability, the way he had kept his promises without making a fuss about it. He had done exactly what he said he would do, asking nothing in return, and that was so foreign to her experience that it felt almost miraculous. "Why are you not married, Cole?" she asked, the wine making her bold. He set down his glass and looked at her seriously. "I almost was once. A girl back in Texas, but she wanted a different kind of life than I could offer, and we parted ways. Since then, I have been focused on work and saving money. I figured the right woman would come along when the time was right. And has she?" The air between them changed, became charged with possibility. He held her gaze and said quietly, "I think she might have." Her heart stuttered in her chest. "Cole." "I am not asking for anything, Amelia," he said, using her first name for the first time. "I just want you to know that these past few weeks, getting to know you, have meant something to me. You mean something to me. But I understand if you are not ready for that, or if you never will be. I will not push." She should have felt trapped, cornered by his confession. Instead, she felt something close to relief, as if he had voiced what she had been afraid to even think. "I am afraid," she said honestly. "I am afraid to trust anyone again. I am afraid of being wrong about you the way I was wrong about Thomas." "That is fair," he said. "I cannot promise I will never disappoint you or make mistakes, but I can promise I will be honest with you always. And I can promise that I will keep every promise I make to you, no matter how small." "Why does that matter so much to you?" she asked. "The promises." "Because my father taught me that a man's word is all he really has," Cole said. "Everything else can be taken away, but your integrity is yours to keep or throw away. I choose to keep mine." She stood abruptly, needing space to think, and walked to the window. Outside, the night was clear and cold, the stars so bright they looked close enough to touch. She heard Cole stand, heard him move closer but not too close, respecting her need for distance. "I want to believe you," she said without turning around. "I want to trust that you are who you seem to be. But I am so tired of being wrong." "Then do not decide tonight," he said gently. "Take your time, I will still be here." She turned to face him. "You say that now, but people change their minds, people leave." "Some people do," he agreed, "but I am not going anywhere unless you ask me to." It was such a simple statement, but it carried the weight of commitment. She searched his face, looking for signs of deception, of hidden motives, of the cracks that had been invisible in Thomas. She found only sincerity. "I need time," she said. "Take all the time you need," he said. "I am a patient man." He left soon after, riding back toward town, and she stood on her porch and watched him go, just as she had so many times before. But this time, something was different. This time, she was not watching him leave. She was watching him go with the knowledge that he would come back, because he had promised, and she was beginning to believe that his promises meant something. Winter settled over the desert, bringing cold nights and short days, and the kind of clarity that comes with low humidity and high altitude. Cole continued to visit, not every day but regularly, riding out to check on the well and share meals and help with the dozens of small tasks that came with maintaining a ranch alone. He fixed the barn door that had been hanging crooked since before Thomas died. He repaired the fence line where the posts had rotted. He brought her firewood and a new axe handle and a saddle blanket for her mare, all small things, all presented casually, as if they were nothing. Each small gesture was a promise kept, a demonstration of reliability that chipped away at her defenses. She began to look forward to his visits not just for the help but for his company, for the conversations that ranged from trivial to profound, for the comfortable silences that spoke of growing familiarity. She learned that he liked his coffee black and his eggs over easy, that he had a scar on his left shoulder from a longhorn that had taken exception to being roped, that he played harmonica, but only when he thought no one was listening. She learned that he was honest to a fault, that he had a quiet sense of humor, that he treated her with a respect that never veered into condescension. And she learned, slowly and with great reluctance, that she was falling in love with him. It was terrifying. Every time she felt herself softening toward him, every time she caught herself smiling at something he said or watching for him on the road, she pulled back, reminded herself of the risks, built the walls a little higher. But Cole was patient, just as he had promised. He never pushed, never demanded more than she was willing to give, and his consistency was its own form of persuasion. Christmas came, and she invited him for dinner, a small celebration with roast chicken and vegetables, and a pie she had made from dried apples. He brought her a gift, wrapped in brown paper and tied with string, and she opened it to find a set of leather work gloves, good quality, perfectly sized for her hands. "For the ranch work," he said. "Your hands were getting torn up." It was a practical gift, thoughtful without being presumptuous, and it made her want to cry. She gave him a scarf she had knitted, dark blue wool that matched his eyes on certain days, and he put it on immediately, despite the fact that they were sitting by the fire and the house was warm. "Thank you," he said, and the pleasure in his voice was genuine. "I will wear it every day." "You do not have to do that," she said. "I want to," he said simply. They ate dinner and talked long into the evening, and when he finally stood to leave, she walked him to the door and, on impulse, stood on her toes and kissed his cheek. It was brief, chaste, but it was the first physical affection she had initiated, and she felt him go very still. "Merry Christmas, Cole," she said softly. "Merry Christmas, Amelia," he said, and his voice was rough with emotion. He rode away, and she closed the door and leaned against it, her heart pounding, wondering if she had just crossed a line she could not uncross. But if she had, Cole gave no indication. He continued to visit, continued to help, continued to be exactly who he had always been. If anything, he seemed more relaxed, as if her small gesture had reassured him in some way. And gradually, so gradually she almost did not notice, she found herself relaxing too, letting her guard down inch by inch, allowing herself to imagine a future that included him. The turning point came in late January, on a cold afternoon when the wind was blowing hard from the north, and the sky was the color of iron. She was in the barn, trying to repair a broken harness, when she heard a horse approaching fast. She looked up to see a rider she did not recognize, a thin man with a mean face and a gun on his hip, and every alarm in her body went off at once. He dismounted without invitation and walked toward the barn, his eyes scanning the property. "This the Sinclair place?" he asked, his voice rough. "It is," she said, keeping her voice steady. "What do you want?" "Looking for Tom Sinclair. He owes me money." "Thomas Sinclair is dead," she said. "He has been dead since September." The man's eyes narrowed. "That is convenient. It is the truth. He is buried in the Coolidge Cemetery if you care to confirm it. And I suppose you do not know anything about the money he owed." "I know he had debts," she said carefully, "but they died with him. I have nothing to give you." The man took a step closer, and she took a step back, her hand moving instinctively toward the knife she kept in her belt. "I find that hard to believe, lady. Tom Sinclair was not the type to leave his wife with nothing." "Then you knew him better than I did," she said, her fear sharpening into anger. "Because that is exactly what he did. Now I suggest you get off my property before I fetch my rifle." "I do not think you will do that," the man said, and his hand moved toward his gun. "I would not if I were you," said a voice from behind him, and they both turned to see Cole standing at the barn entrance, his own gun drawn and pointed steadily at the intruder. He must have ridden up quietly, tying his horse out of earshot. "The lady asked you to leave. I suggest you do that." The man looked between them, calculating odds. Cole's gun did not waver, and his expression was hard in a way Amelia had never seen before, all the gentleness gone, replaced by something cold and dangerous. "This is not your business, Cowboy," the man said. "She is my business," Cole said flatly. "Now you have 3 seconds to get on your horse and ride away, or I will shoot you where you stand." 1. The man backed toward his horse, hands raised. "You are making a mistake." 2. The man swung into his saddle and spurred his horse into a run, disappearing down the road in a cloud of dust. Cole held his position until the rider was out of sight, then holstered his gun and turned to Amelia. "Are you all right?" he asked, and the hardness was gone, replaced by concern. She realized she was shaking. "Yes, thank you, if you had not come." "I did come," he said, closing the distance between them. "I will always come when you need me, that is a promise." The enormity of what could have happened crashed over her, and she found herself pressed against his chest, his arms coming around her, holding her tightly. She let herself take comfort in his strength, in the solid reality of him, and she felt something inside her finally let go, the last wall crumbling. "I was so scared," she whispered against his shirt. "I know," he said, his hand stroking her hair, "but you are safe now. I will not let anyone hurt you." She pulled back enough to look up at him, and the expression in his eyes made her breath catch. There was love there, open and unguarded, and something in her responded to it, reached for it like a plant reaching for sunlight. "Cole," she said, and then she could not find words for what she needed to say, so she kissed him instead. It was different from the chaste kiss at Christmas, fierce and desperate, and full of all the emotions she had been holding back. He responded immediately, one hand cradling her face, the other at her back, pulling her closer. The kiss deepened, and she felt herself melt into him, giving herself over to the moment, to the need, to the trust that had been building between them for months. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, he rested his forehead against hers. "Amelia," he said, and her name on his lips sounded like a prayer. "I love you," she said, the words tumbling out before she could stop them. "I did not want to, and I fought it, but I do. I love you." "I love you too," he said, and his voice shook with the force of it. "I have loved you since the day you agreed to let me dig the well, since you stood there all fierce and scared and refusing charity. You are the strongest, bravest person I have ever met, and I love you more than I know how to say." She kissed him again, softer this time, savoring it. "What do we do now?" she asked. "I have some ideas," he said with a small smile, "but first I want to ask you properly." He pulled back and took her hands in his, looking at her with such intensity that her heart skipped. Amelia Sinclair, will you marry me? I do not have much to offer beyond my word and my work, but I promise I will spend every day trying to make you happy. I will keep you safe, and I will be honest with you, and I will love you for as long as I live. Will you marry me? She had sworn she would never marry again, that she would never give another man that kind of power over her life. But Cole was not asking for power. He was offering partnership. He had proven himself 100 times over, kept every promise, earned her trust one small gesture at a time. Yes, she said, and the word felt like freedom. Yes, I will marry you. The smile that broke across his face was incandescent. He picked her up and spun her around, laughing, and she found herself laughing too, giddy with relief and joy and the simple pleasure of being loved by someone good. They were married 3 weeks later, in the small church in Coolidge with a handful of witnesses, including Cole's foreman from the bar M and the woman who ran the boarding house where Cole had been staying. Amelia wore a simple blue dress, and Cole wore his best shirt and the scarf she had given him for Christmas. The ceremony was brief, the vows traditional, but when Cole promised to love, honor, and cherish her, she heard the echo of all the small promises he had already kept, and she believed him. They honeymooned at the ranch, which was now truly theirs after Cole paid off the remaining mortgage with his savings. It was not a grand gesture, but it was deeply meaningful, a tangible demonstration of commitment. He moved his few belongings into her house, and they began the process of building a life together. It was not always easy. Amelia had scars that did not heal overnight, moments when fear would override reason and she would pull away, expecting betrayal. But Cole was patient, always patient, giving her space when she needed it and reassurance when she asked. He kept his promises, all of them, even the tiny ones that seemed inconsequential. If he said he would be home by sunset, he was home by sunset. If he promised to fix something, it got fixed. If he said he loved her, he showed it in 1,000 small ways every day. And gradually, over the course of that first year of marriage, Amelia learned to trust completely. Not blindly, the way she had trusted Thomas, but with eyes open, built on evidence and consistency, and the solid foundation of Cole's character. She learned that love did not have to be complicated or dramatic, that it could be simple and steady and reliable. She learned that promises kept were worth more than promises made. She learned that she was capable of being happy again, truly happy, in a way she had not been since she was a child. Cole left the bar M and focused on building up their ranch, which they renamed the Double M for Matthews. He bought cattle with money they saved together, started a small herd that grew slowly but surely. Amelia worked beside him, learning to ride and rope and brand, discovering that she was good at ranch work, that she liked the physicality of it, the tangible results. They were partners in every sense of the word, making decisions together, building something together. In the spring of 1885, Amelia discovered she was pregnant. The news filled her with joy and terror in equal measure. But Cole was thrilled, already planning additions to the house, and talking about teaching their child to ride. His excitement was contagious, and she found herself caught up in it, imagining the future in a way she had not allowed herself to do since Thomas died. Their son was born in November, a healthy baby with dark hair and his father's gray eyes. They named him Benjamin, after Cole's father, and Cole held him with such tenderness that Amelia fell in love with him all over again. He was a devoted father, patient and gentle, singing off key lullabies and walking the floor at night when Benjamin cried, insisting that Amelia rest. "You promised to love me forever," she teased him one night, watching him rock their son. "You did not mention you would be good at this too." "That was implied," he said with a grin. "I am a man of many hidden talents." "I am discovering that," she said. Life settled into a rhythm, the seasons turning, the ranch growing. They added sheep to their cattle, diversifying, and Amelia proved to have a knack for the wool business, negotiating good prices with buyers in Phoenix and Tucson. Cole expanded the house, adding 2 bedrooms and a proper porch, building with his own hands and the help of neighbors who came for barn raisings and fence mendings, the community of ranchers who looked out for each other in the hard country. Benjamin grew into a lively toddler, curious and fearless, and they had to constantly watch that he did not wander off toward the cattle or try to climb into the well. When he was 3, Amelia became pregnant again, and their daughter Sarah was born in the summer of 1888, a tiny thing with her mother's dark eyes and a temperament that was pure determination. "She is going to be a handful," Cole predicted, watching their daughter refuse to sleep despite obvious exhaustion. "She comes by it honestly," Amelia said. "I was apparently a stubborn child." "Apparently," Cole said with mock innocence, and she threw a pillow at him. The years passed, filled with work and laughter and the ordinary challenges of ranch life and raising children. There were hard times too, drought years when the cattle suffered and money was tight, illnesses that scared them, accidents that reminded them how fragile life was. But they faced it all together, and Cole never wavered, never broke a promise, never gave Amelia reason to doubt him. On their 10th wedding anniversary, they sat on the porch in the evening, watching the sun set over the desert while their children played in the yard. Benjamin was nearly 11, already helping with the cattle, and Sarah was 7, following her brother everywhere despite his protests. "You ever regret it?" Cole asked, taking her hand. "Marrying me, staying here?" Amelia looked at him, at the man who had earned her trust one promise at a time, who had loved her patiently through her fear and doubt, who had built a life with her that was solid and real and good. "Not for a single moment," she said. "You gave me back something I thought I had lost forever." "What is that?" "The ability to believe in promises," she said. "The ability to trust that words can match actions, that love can be simple and honest. You showed me what real partnership looks like, and I am grateful for it every day." "I did promise I would make you happy," he said. "How am I doing?" She leaned over and kissed him, soft and sweet. "You are doing just fine, Cole Matthews, just fine." They sat together as the sky darkened and the stars came out, the children's laughter floating on the evening air, and Amelia thought about promises and trust and the long road that had brought her here. She had been broken once, shattered by betrayal, and she had believed she would never be whole again. But Cole had gathered up the pieces gently, carefully, and had helped her rebuild herself into someone stronger, someone capable of trusting again. It was not the love story she had imagined when she was young, full of grand gestures and dramatic declarations. It was better than that. It was real, built on small promises kept in quiet devotion and the kind of steady love that lasted. It was a love that had been earned, piece by piece, promise by promise, and it was worth every moment of fear she had overcome to claim it. The desert night settled around them, vast and beautiful and honest, and Amelia Sinclair Matthews held her husband's hand and felt, for the first time in her life, completely and utterly at peace. Years continued to roll by like tumbleweeds across the desert floor, and the Double M Ranch flourished under Cole and Amelia's joint stewardship. Benjamin grew into a fine young man, tall and capable like his father, with his mother's sharp mind for business. Sarah, true to Cole's early prediction, was indeed a handful, but in the best possible way spirited and intelligent. She could ride as well as any cowboy on the ranch by the time she was 12, and had opinions about everything from cattle breeding to politics. In 1893, When Benjamin was 18 and preparing to take on more responsibility at the ranch, Cole sat him down for a conversation that Amelia overheard from the kitchen window. They were on the porch, father and son, and Cole was speaking in that serious tone he used for important matters. "Your mother and I have built something here," Cole was saying. "But we built it together as partners. When you eventually find someone you want to marry, remember that. A good marriage is not about one person leading and the other following. It is about walking side by side, making decisions together, keeping your promises even when it is hard." "You and Ma make it look easy," Benjamin said. Cole laughed. "It is not always easy, son. Your mother had every reason not to trust me when we met. Her first husband betrayed her badly, left her with nothing but debts and lies. I had to prove myself, day after day, promise after promise, until she could believe that I meant what I said. And even now, after all these years, I still work to keep her trust. You do not just earn it once and then forget about it. Trust is something you maintain like a fence line. You check it regularly, repair any weak spots, make sure it stays strong." Amelia smiled to herself, stirring the pot on the stove. Cole was right. Their marriage had required work, but it was the kind of work that felt rewarding rather than burdensome. They had built something solid together, and it showed in every aspect of their lives. That same year, they decided to expand their operations significantly. The territory was growing. Coolidge was becoming more established, and there was increasing demand for quality beef and wool. Cole proposed buying additional land to the west, closer to the river, and Amelia, who had become quite savvy about finances over the years, worked out the numbers and agreed it was a sound investment. They took out a loan from the bank, the same bank that had held the mortgage on the original ranch, and the banker, now an old man who remembered Amelia as the desperate widow who had almost lost everything, approved it with a handshake and words of respect. "You two have built something impressive," he said. "The whole territory knows the Double M brand stands for quality and integrity." "We have worked hard," Cole acknowledged. "That you have," the banker agreed. "But plenty of people work hard and fail. You two succeeded because you work together." "That is rarer than you might think." It was true. Amelia looked around at other ranches and saw marriages of convenience, partnerships built on economics rather than affection, women who were treated as property rather than partners. She knew how fortunate she was, how different her life might have been if Cole had not ridden into Coolidge that autumn day in 1883, if he had not offered to dig a well, if he had not kept his promises. The new land purchase proved profitable. They hired additional hands to help manage the expanded herd, and Cole took on the role of foreman with the same quiet competence he brought to everything. Amelia managed the business side, negotiating contracts and maintaining the books, and together they built the Double M into one of the most successful ranches in the region. Sarah, showing an unexpected aptitude for mechanics, became fascinated with the new agricultural equipment that was starting to appear in the territory. When she was 16, in 1897, she convinced her father to invest in a steam-powered water pump for the new land, arguing that it would be more efficient than the traditional windmills. Cole, who had learned to trust his daughter's instincts, agreed, and Sarah spent weeks learning how to operate and maintain the complicated machinery. "Where did she get that mechanical mind?" Cole asked Amelia one evening, watching Sarah take apart the pump's engine for the third time. "From you," Amelia said. "You built half this ranch with your own hands. She just took that practical skill and applied it differently." "I suppose," Cole said, but he looked pleased. In 1899, Benjamin married a young woman named Catherine Sullivan, whose family owned a ranch north of Phoenix. It was a love match, which pleased both Cole and Amelia greatly, and the wedding was a joyous affair with guests coming from all over the territory. As Amelia watched her son exchange vows with his bride, she thought about her own wedding in that small church in Coolidge, about how far they had all come. During the reception, Cole pulled her aside and led her to a quiet spot under the cottonwoods. "I have been thinking," he said. "That is usually dangerous," she teased. He smiled. "I have been thinking about how much I love you and how grateful I am that you took a chance on me all those years ago." "You made it easy," she said. "You kept every promise." "I tried," he said. "But what I really want to say is that I promise to keep loving you for however many years we have left. I promise to be your partner until the very end. I promise that you will never regret trusting me." Tears filled her eyes. After 16 years of marriage, he could still move her with his words. "I know," she said. "I have always known. That is why I love you." They kissed in the shade of the cottonwoods, and when they returned to the reception, Sarah looked at them with the exasperated affection of a daughter who found her parents embarrassing and endearing in equal measure. The turn of the century brought changes to the territory. Arizona was moving toward statehood, though it would be years yet before that happened. The railroad expanded, making it easier to ship cattle and goods. Automobiles began to appear occasionally on the roads, strange mechanical beasts that spooked the horses. The world was modernizing, but the fundamentals of ranch life remained the same: hard work, integrity, and the trust between partners. In 1902, Sarah announced that she wanted to attend a technical college in California to study engineering. It was an unconventional choice for a young woman, and Amelia saw in her daughter the same fierce determination she herself had shown when she decided to stay on the ranch after Thomas died. "Do you think I should let her go?" Cole asked Amelia privately. "I think we should support her," Amelia said. "She has a gift, Cole. She should have the chance to develop it. It will be expensive, we can afford it, and besides, she is not asking for permission. She is telling us what she intends to do. We raised her to be independent and strong. We cannot fault her for being exactly that." Cole nodded slowly. "You are right, I just worry." "Of course you do. You are her father, but worrying does not mean holding her back." Sarah left for California that fall, and the ranch felt emptier without her energy and noise. But she wrote regularly, long letters full of excitement about her studies and her plans. Cole kept every letter in a box on his desk, reading them over when he missed her particularly badly. Benjamin and Catherine settled on the northern portion of the Double M land, building their own house and starting their own herd under the ranch's brand. In 1903, they had a son, making Cole and Amelia grandparents for the first time. Cole was utterly smitten with his grandson, who they named Thomas Cole after both grandfathers. "I thought you would not want us to use Thomas," Benjamin said when they announced the name. Amelia touched her grandson's tiny hand and felt a complicated mix of emotions. "Your father was not a good man," she said carefully. "But I was married to him, and he was part of my life. I cannot change that, and I do not want to pretend it did not happen. Using the name honors the memory without denying the truth." Cole squeezed her shoulder gently, and she leaned into him, grateful as always for his understanding. The years marched on, bringing the joys and sorrows that come with life. They lost Cole's foreman to a heart attack in 1905. And it hit Cole hard. The man had been a good friend as well as an employee. They weathered a terrible drought in 1906 that nearly broke them financially. But Amelia's careful management and their good reputation allowed them to secure loans to buy feed and keep the herd alive until the rains returned. Sarah graduated from her technical college and returned to Arizona, not to the ranch but to Phoenix, where she took a position with a company that was installing electric systems throughout the territory. "Are you disappointed she did not come home?" Cole asked Amelia. "No," Amelia said honestly. "I am proud of her. She is making her own way, just like we did." In 1908, Sarah married an electrical engineer named David Warner, and they settled in Phoenix. The wedding was modern and slightly scandalous, with Sarah wearing a practical dress instead of a traditional gown and insisting on vows that made no mention of obedience. Cole looked uncomfortable during the ceremony, but when Amelia squeezed his hand, he relaxed. "They love each other," Amelia whispered. "That is what matters." "I know," Cole whispered back. "I just wish she had worn a proper dress." Amelia suppressed a laugh. By 1910, Cole and Amelia were in their mid-50s, and the ranch was running smoothly under Benjamin's increasingly capable management. Cole still worked every day, but he had slowed down slightly, admitting to aches and pains he would have ignored in his younger years. Amelia had lines around her eyes and silver threading through her dark hair, but she was healthy and strong, and Cole told her regularly that she was more beautiful than ever. They were sitting on the porch one evening in late summer, watching the sunset paint the desert in shades of orange and purple when Cole said, "I have been thinking about what comes next." "Next?" Amelia asked. "Benjamin is ready to take over the ranch completely. Catherine is a good partner for him, and they are raising Thomas well. Sarah is successful in Phoenix. We have done what we set out to do, Amelia. We built something lasting. So what are you proposing?" "I am proposing that we take some time for ourselves," Cole said. "Travel a bit, see some of the country we have never seen. Maybe go back to Missouri so I can show you where I grew up. Maybe go east so you can see your cousins in Ohio." Amelia considered this. "You want to leave the ranch, not permanently, just for a few months." "We have spent nearly 30 years building this place. I think we have earned a break." She realized he was right. They had worked ceaselessly for decades, and while she loved the ranch, the idea of seeing new places with Cole was appealing. "All right," she said. "Let us do it." They left in the spring of 1911, taking the train east with a sense of adventure that reminded Amelia of being young. They visited Missouri first, and Cole showed her the farm where he had grown up, long since sold to another family but still recognizable. They visited his parents' graves and left flowers. Then they went to Ohio, where Amelia's cousins greeted her with surprise and warmth, the old disapproval forgotten after so many years. "You look happy," her cousin Margaret said. "Happier than I ever remember you being." "I am," Amelia said simply. "I married a good man." They spent 3 months traveling, seeing cities and countryside, experiencing the parts of America that were industrializing and modernizing. But everywhere they went, Amelia found herself missing the desert, the big skies, the honest simplicity of ranch life. Cole felt the same, she could tell, and when they finally boarded the train back to Arizona, they both sighed with relief. "Home," Cole said as the desert landscape began to appear outside the windows. "Home," Amelia agreed. They returned to the Double M in late summer, and Benjamin and Catherine greeted them with hugs and news. The ranch had run smoothly in their absence, and young Thomas, now 8, had been practicing his roping with his grandfather's old lariat, waiting for Cole to teach him properly. Life settled back into familiar patterns, but with a new ease. Cole and Amelia were no longer running the ranch day to day, which freed them to enjoy the fruits of their decades of labor. They took long rides together, exploring parts of the territory they had never had time to visit. They read books in the evening and played cards and talked about everything and nothing. They watched their grandson grow and helped when Benjamin and Catherine had a second child, a daughter named Amelia. "You do not mind that we used your name?" Catherine asked nervously. "Mind," Amelia said, holding her tiny namesake. "I am honored." In 1912, Sarah and David had twins, a boy and a girl, and Sarah wrote that she was bringing them to visit as soon as they were old enough to travel. The letters continued to flow between Phoenix and the ranch, keeping them connected despite the distance. Cole turned 60 in 1914, and Amelia threw him a party that brought together everyone they knew, ranch hands past and present, neighbors from miles around, their children and grandchildren. There were speeches and laughter and enough food to feed an army. As the party wound down and guests began to leave, Cole found Amelia in the kitchen, putting away dishes. "You did not have to do all this," he said. "I wanted to," she said. "You deserve to be celebrated." He came up behind her and wrapped his arms around her waist, resting his chin on her shoulder. "I love you, Amelia Matthews. I have loved you for 31 years, and I will love you for another 31 if we are lucky enough to have them." She turned in his arms and kissed him. "I love you too. You gave me back my life, Cole. You showed me what it means to be loved properly, to be trusted and respected. I was so broken when you found me, and you had the patience to let me heal, to prove that not all men are like Thomas. You kept your promises, every single one, and you taught me to believe in love again." "Best thing I ever did was dig that well," Cole said with a smile. "Best thing I ever did was let you," Amelia replied. They stood together in the kitchen of the house Cole had expanded with his own hands. On the ranch they had built together, surrounded by the family they had raised, and Amelia felt a contentment so complete it was almost overwhelming. She had been afraid to trust after Thomas's betrayal, had believed that love was just another form of lies. But Cole had earned her confidence one promise at a time, had proven that words and actions could align, that love could be steady and true and lasting. The years that followed were gentle ones. Cole's health remained good, though he moved a bit slower and took longer to recover from hard work. Amelia developed arthritis in her hands but continued to manage the ranch's books, refusing to let a little pain stop her. They celebrated Benjamin and Catherine's 15th wedding anniversary, watched young Thomas grow into a teenager who was already talking about taking over the ranch someday, delighted in their grandchildren's visits and letters. In 1918, when the Great War ended and the world began to recover, Sarah and David moved back to Arizona, settling in Coolidge itself. Sarah opened a small engineering firm, one of the first in the territory to be owned by a woman, and David worked with her. They bought a house just down the road from the ranch, close enough for frequent visits but far enough to maintain independence. "I always come back to the desert," Sarah told her parents. "No matter where else I go, this is home." Cole and Amelia celebrated their 35th wedding anniversary in 1920, and the whole family gathered at the ranch for the occasion. Benjamin and Catherine, with their 3 children. Sarah and David, with their twins. Neighbors and friends who had become family over the decades. They ate and danced and told stories, and when Cole made a toast, his voice was strong and clear. 35 years ago, I met a woman who had every reason to distrust men, to close her heart and refuse help. But she was brave enough to take a chance on a cowboy who offered to dig a well. That decision changed both our lives. Amelia, you have made me happier than I ever dreamed possible. You have been my partner in every sense of the word, my equal in all things, the love of my life. Thank you for trusting me. Thank you for loving me. Thank you for building this life with me. There was not a dry eye in the room. Amelia stood and kissed her husband, and everyone cheered. That night, Lying in bed beside Cole in the darkness, Amelia thought about the long road that had brought them here. She thought about the girl she had been, naive and romantic, who had married Thomas Sinclair without truly knowing him. She thought about the widow she had become, broken and afraid, believing she would never trust again. She thought about the day Cole had offered to dig her well and how close she had come to refusing, to letting fear win. "What are you thinking about?" Cole asked, his voice drowsy. "How lucky I am," she said. "How lucky we both are." "Not luck," Cole said. "Choice. You chose to trust me, and I chose to be worthy of that trust. We chose each other every day for 35 years. That is not luck. That is love." He was right, of course. He usually was about such things. Love was a choice made and remade, promise by promise, day by day. And she would choose Cole Matthews every single time. They drifted off to sleep together as they had for 35 years, comfortable and content in the home they had built, the life they had created, the love they had earned. The ranch continued to thrive as the 1920s unfolded. Benjamin proved to be an excellent manager, combining his father's work ethic with his mother's business acumen. Young Thomas, now grown and in his early 20s, was taking on more responsibility, and it was clear the Double M would remain strong for another generation. Catherine had proven herself as capable as Amelia in running a household and managing the complex social dynamics of ranch life. And their youngest daughter, little Amelia, was showing signs of inheriting Sarah's mechanical aptitude. Cole and Amelia settled into a comfortable rhythm of semi-retirement. They still helped with ranch work when needed, but mostly they enjoyed the slower pace. Cole spent hours with his grandchildren, teaching them to rope and ride and track animals through the desert. Amelia tended a large garden, something she had always wanted but never had time for, growing vegetables and herbs and flowers that flourished in the desert soil with proper watering. In 1923, on a warm spring morning, Cole woke with a pain in his chest. He tried to dismiss it, but Amelia saw the grimace on his face and insisted they ride into town to see the doctor. The examination was thorough, and the doctor's face was grave when he delivered the news. "Your heart is weakening, Cole," Dr. Morrison said. "It happens with age. You need to take it easy, avoid strenuous work, rest more." Cole nodded, accepting the diagnosis with his characteristic calm, but Amelia felt fear clutch at her heart. They rode back to the ranch in silence, and that evening, sitting on the porch, Cole took her hand. "I am not afraid," he said quietly. "I have had a good life, a full life. If my time comes tomorrow or 10 years from now, I will have no regrets." "Do not talk like that," Amelia said, her voice tight. "We have to talk about it eventually," Cole said gently. "I want you to know that I am at peace. I got to love you, to build a life with you, to raise children and see grandchildren. I got more than most men dream of." "You are not allowed to leave me," Amelia said fiercely. "You promised to love me forever, and forever is not finished yet." Cole smiled. "Fair point. I will stick around as long as I can then. I have never broken a promise to you, and I do not intend to start now." He kept that promise. He slowed down, followed the doctor's orders, and while his energy was not what it once was, he remained healthy and active. They adjusted their routines, took shorter rides, spent more time sitting and talking rather than working. It was not the life they had once lived, but it was still good, still full of love and companionship. In 1925, Sarah gave them wonderful news. She had been offered a consulting position with a company in California that was working on electrical infrastructure for rural areas. It was an important job, recognition of her expertise, and while it meant she would be away more often, she promised to visit regularly. "I am so proud of her," Cole told Amelia after Sarah and David left following the announcement. Our daughter is changing the world. Both our children are remarkable, Amelia agreed. We raised them well. We did, Cole said. But mostly they raised themselves. We just gave them the tools and got out of the way. Benjamin and Catherine's oldest, Thomas, married in 1926, a lovely ceremony that reminded Cole and Amelia of their own wedding 4 decades earlier. The young couple settled on a portion of the ranch, continuing the Matthews tradition of building family and livelihood in the same soil. Cole turned 73 in 1927, and while his hair was now completely white and his face deeply lined, his eyes were still the same clear gray that Amelia had fallen in love with. They celebrated quietly, just the two of them, with a special dinner that Amelia cooked and a long evening sitting on the porch, watching the stars emerge one by one. "You remember the first time you kissed me?" Amelia asked. "In the barn after that man came threatening you," Cole said immediately. "You had just told me you loved me and I thought my heart would burst." "I was so scared," Amelia said. "Not of the man, but of loving you, of trusting you, of being wrong again." "But you were not wrong," Cole said. "No," Amelia agreed. "I was not wrong. You were exactly who you seemed to be, and you have been that person every day since. You kept your promises, Cole, all of them." "And I will keep on keeping them," Cole said, "for as long as I can." They sat in comfortable silence, hands clasped, watching the desert night settle around them. The land that had seemed so harsh and unforgiving when Amelia first arrived now felt like home in a way that nowhere else ever had. This was where she had learned to trust again, to love again, to believe in herself again. This was where she had built a life with a man who had earned her confidence one promise at a time. The summer of 1928 was brutally hot, even by Arizona standards. The temperatures climbed over 110 degrees day after day, and everyone moved slowly, conserving energy. Cole spent most of his time in the shade, reading or napping, while Amelia fussed over him and made sure he drank enough water. One evening in late August, as the sun was finally setting and bringing slight relief from the heat, Cole and Amelia took their usual positions on the porch. Benjamin and his family had been by earlier, along with little Amelia's children, filling the house with noise and laughter before departing. Now it was just the two of them again, as it so often was. 45 years, Cole said suddenly. "What?" Amelia asked. "We will have been married 45 years this November," Cole said. "That is a long time, Amelia, a good long time." "It has gone by so quickly," Amelia said. "It seems like just yesterday you were digging that well and I was trying to figure out if I could trust you." "And now?" Cole asked with a small smile. "Now I trust you more than I trust myself," Amelia said honestly. "You have never let me down, Cole, not once in 45 years." "I tried not to," Cole said. "You deserved someone reliable after what you went through with Thomas. You deserved someone who would keep his word." "You gave me more than that," Amelia said. "You gave me partnership, respect, love that never wavered. You gave me back my faith in people, in men, in myself. I was so broken when we met and you helped me heal, not by fixing me, but by being steady enough that I could fix myself." Cole reached over and took her hand, his grip still strong despite his age. "You were never broken, Amelia. You were wounded, yes, but broken? No. You were the strongest person I had ever met then and now. You survived betrayal and loss and built a life from nothing. I just provided some help along the way." "You provided everything," Amelia said softly. "You were my foundation." They sat watching the stars emerge, the same stars they had watched for decades, constant and eternal. The desert stretched around them, beautiful and harsh and honest, the land that had witnessed their love story from beginning to this moment. "I love you," Cole said, as he had said thousands of times over 45 years. But it never got old, never lost its power. "I love you too," Amelia replied, as she always did. "For always." Cole squeezed her hand gently. "For always," he echoed. They sat together in the gathering darkness. Two people who had found each other against the odds, who had built a life on trust and promises kept, who had loved each other through joy and sorrow, through prosperity and hardship, through all the years that made a life. The cowboy who had earned a frightened woman's trust one promise at a time, and the woman who had been brave enough to let him try. The night deepened around them, warm and vast, and they remained there, hands clasped, hearts joined, complete. They made it to their 45th wedding anniversary that November, celebrating with another gathering of family and friends at the ranch. Cole was frailer than he had been, needing a cane to walk steadily, but his mind was sharp, and his love for Amelia burned as brightly as ever. During the celebration, he stood with difficulty and raised his glass. 45 years ago, I made promises to this remarkable woman," he said, his voice carrying despite his age. "I promised to love her, to honor her, to be faithful to her. I promised to be honest, to be reliable, to earn her trust every single day. And I have done my best to keep those promises, because she deserved nothing less. Amelia, you have been the joy of my life, my partner in all things, my reason for getting up each morning. Thank you for taking a chance on a cowboy with nothing to offer but his word. Thank you for building this beautiful life with me. I love you more today than I did 45 years ago, and that is saying something." There was not a dry eye in the room. Amelia stood and embraced her husband, and the guests erupted in applause. That winter was mild, and Cole seemed to rally slightly, as if he was determined to see one more spring. They spent Christmas surrounded by family, with grandchildren and great-grandchildren filling every corner of the house. Cole held court in his favorite chair, telling stories of the old days, teaching the youngest ones simple rope tricks, delighting in the chaos and love that swirled around him. In early February of 1929, on a morning that dawned clear and cold, Cole did not wake up. Amelia, lying beside him as she had for 45 years, realized he was gone before she even opened her eyes. She felt the stillness of him, the absence of his breathing, and she knew. She lay there for a long moment, her hand on his chest, tears streaming silently down her face. He looked peaceful, as if he had simply drifted away in his sleep, which was exactly how he would have wanted it. No pain, no struggle, just a quiet transition from one state to another. "You kept your promise," she whispered. "You loved me for as long as you lived. Thank you, Cole. Thank you for everything." The funeral was large, with people coming from all over the territory to pay their respects. Cole Matthews had been known as a man of integrity, a good rancher, a loving husband and father, a friend who could be counted on. The stories people told painted a picture of a life well lived, of a man who had made a difference simply by being decent and kind and reliable. Amelia stood beside the grave and did not cry, not because she was not grieving, but because she had already done her crying in private. Now she was remembering, honoring, celebrating. Cole had given her 45 years of steady love, of promises kept, of partnership and respect and devotion. He had earned her trust one promise at a time and had never once betrayed it. He had taken a frightened, wounded woman and loved her back to wholeness. He had been everything a husband should be and more. When the service ended and people began to drift away, Benjamin came to stand beside his mother. "Are you all right, Ma?" he asked gently. "I will be," Amelia said. "Your father would want me to be." "What will you do now, Live?" Amelia said simply. "Keep going. Honor his memory by continuing the life we built together. That is what he would want." She moved back into the main house on the ranch. The one Cole had expanded and improved over the decades, surrounded by memories of their life together. She kept herself busy with the garden and with the grandchildren, who visited often. She still managed some of the ranch's financial affairs, refusing to be sidelined by age or grief. She wrote letters to Sarah in California, visited Benjamin's family regularly, and tried to be the kind of woman Cole had always believed she was: strong, capable, resilient. But the nights were hard. The house was too quiet without Cole's presence, without his gentle snoring, without the warmth of him beside her. She would lie awake remembering conversations, laughter, the thousand small moments that had made up their life together. She missed him with an ache that never fully went away, but she also felt grateful. So many people lived entire lifetimes without experiencing the kind of love she and Cole had shared. She had been lucky, blessed, to have had him for 45 years. Amelia lived for another 12 years, dying peacefully in her sleep in the spring of 1941 at the age of 83. Sarah and Benjamin were with her in those final days, along with many of the grandchildren and great-grandchildren who had been the fruit of her love with Cole. She told them stories about their grandfather, about the cowboy who had dug a well and earned her trust, about the promises he had kept and the life they had built. "He was the best man I ever knew," she told them. "He showed me what real love looks like, what real partnership means." Remember that, all of you. Do not settle for less than someone who keeps their promises, who treats you as an equal, who loves you steadily through all seasons. That is what your grandfather gave me, and it made all the difference. They buried her beside Cole in the Coolidge Cemetery, under the big sky they had both loved, on the land they had helped tame. The ranch continued, passed down through the generations, and the Matthews name became synonymous with integrity and hard work in that part of Arizona. The story of Cole and Amelia, of the cowboy who earned a frightened woman's trust one promise at a time, became family legend, told and retold to each new generation. And on clear desert nights, when the stars came out bright and endless over the land they had loved, people said you could still feel their presence somehow, the steady devotion of Cole Matthews and the hard-won trust of Amelia Sinclair Matthews, whose love story had been built on the solid foundation of promises kept and faith rewarded, a love that had lasted through life and beyond, eternal as the desert sky.